What is up, creatives? This is Tom. Welcome back to another video. In this one, what I'm going to be talking about is my switch from Premiere Pro, which I've been using for about 7 years, and moving over to Final Cut Pro X. The reasons behind it, the motivations, and of course how it's benefited me, the pros, advantages, and disadvantages. So first of all, I want to break down some problems that I was having with Premiere Pro, the sort of motivations behind the switch, and then how Final Cut Pro 10 is helping me solve those problems. And the first of all is timeline scrubbing. I shoot a lot of footage in 4K, and basically in Premiere Pro on, I believe it's a 2016 MacBook Pro, so a pretty fairly recent MacBook, not sort of a 2014, 2013 version. Premiere Pro just couldn't play any of that footage back without using proxies. And proxy files are fine, but do require a lot more work. It slows down the process. I do just like the sort of flexibility of just dropping my footage into a timeline and being able to edit with it right away. The problem with Adobe is it's just not optimized enough for the Mac hardware. And I dropped that footage in and I just couldn't play back my timeline, be working on a project and just not being able to see what I was producing unless you really whack down the quality of your preview. And even then, sometimes it was just still stuttering, still really struggling with the quality of video. With Final Cut Pro, I can pretty much drop any footage that I shoot, no matter what the codec, no matter what the resolution. But granted, I don't shoot anything up to sort of the 6K, 8K resolutions, but anything at 4K just immediately plays back buttery smooth. I can drop a lot on the footage and it is absolutely fine. That is just an absolute breeze. My fans don't ramp up. It doesn't sort of get my computer going absolutely crazy like it would using Premiere Pro and or After Effects. It just gives me so much more flexibility, so much more joy to use using Final Cut, being able to just watch everything in real time with basically no problems. So that sort of tallies into the next point, which is stability. Now, anyone that uses Final Cut Pro and the Adobe suite, especially on Mac, I haven't used Windows for a long time, so I don't know whether the Windows version of Premiere Pro has sort of much better stability, but on Mac, it really does crash a lot. That goes for After Effects as well, but Premiere Pro particularly, this little box of death is going to be following creators around no matter what Mac you're on or what project you're working on. And since switching to Final Cut Pro for the past sort of month or so, I really haven't had any issues. No crashes, no sort of saving, duplication of projects, that type of thing. It really has been a bit of a savior from a stability standpoint. Another absolute win that I just was not expecting is rendering speed. Now, Final Cut Pro, don't ask me how it does it, but can render out sort of a 3, 4, 5 minute video in 4K, render that out in probably under 2 minutes. Now with Premiere Pro, that would have been at least a half an hour render for me. It is really just fairly mind-boggling how fast some of the rendering speeds have been using Final Cut 10. Now, I'll hold my hands up and say that rendering speed has never been sort of a real issue for me. I'm happy to work on a project, leave my computer rendering, and then upload that video once I'm finished with it. But I just did not expect the rendering speed to improve so much more than it has using Final Cut 10. It really has been an absolute blessing in disguise. There's no issues. If I have sort of a small tweak to do on a project, I can just make that change, render it out, and it really does just take a few minutes versus on Premiere when that was a bit of a chore and a headache. And there is another one here which any creative who uses the Adobe suite will know is the price. Now, the Adobe pricing system has come on leaps and bounds than what it used to be. You used to have to pay a really large upfront cost and then you wouldn't get any upgrades. The Creative Cloud license allows you to sort of spend about the $50, £50 a month-ish, and then it's a recurring price, recurring subscription, but you do get the latest updates, latest softwares, etc. The challenge is that that price does add up. The Final Cut 10 license, you get all of the updates, all for one bundle price of, I think it's £299. I'm not sure what the dollar price is. I would imagine that $299 price as well, but you put compressor on top, which is their sort of media encoder equivalent, and again, it starts looking at the £350 mark, but that is one and done. You are done once you pay for that software. That means that the price overall is so much cheaper than the Adobe suite, and you still get all of those updates that Apple are constantly churning out. So all in all, I'm extremely happy that I've switched, because of those advantages. However, there are some reasons why I never wanted to switch in the first place. First and foremost, Premiere Pro and After Effects, and that relationship is important, is an extremely powerful editor. I still actually think, I'm only a couple of months in to relearning Final Cut 10, but Premiere Pro is, I believe, a more powerful editing software. The capabilities of the software, the things you can do with it, in my mind, are a bit more powerful than the Final Cut 10 offering. Certain things work a little bit better. The sort of file and structure management, that type of thing, is really top notch, but the performance issues on the Mac operating system really do just hold it back. And again, I mentioned that integration with After Effects. With Premiere Pro, you can just sort of right click a composition and immediately send it to After Effects to render it out there, and it all sort of dynamically linked into your composition. Final Cut 10 does not have that. Even with Motion, which is their sort of After Effects equivalent, the process is really slow and arduous. You do have to render stuff out, and it's just really not perfect. I still work in After Effects a lot of the time because I know that software really well inside out. The problem is then I have to sort of render them into sort of B-roll folders, and I'm just having to work with compositions, render those compositions out inside After Effects and drop those in my timeline in Final Cut 10. What I will say though is that the sort of editing process is so much more efficient in Final Cut 10 that I'm still, even with that sort of rendering in and out of After Effects, I'm still way ahead of my editing pace that I was in Premiere Pro. So let me go through some challenges that I have had with Final Cut Pro 10 and how I've sort of mitigated those or worked around them to bring the editor a little bit closer to how I like to work, or how I previously have worked with Premiere Pro. The file management system and duplication of files was a real headache initially using Final Cut. By default, it likes to sort of copy every single file that you are using into what's called a library, and the structure is just all a bit strange. I'm sure if you've learned using Final Cut Pro, it is a real breeze to get to know, but I'm used to having sort of organizing all of my projects in my own file system that I'm used to, and then having sort of everything duplicated into a library really started to use up the storage space on my MacBook, even when I'm using external drives, like I mentioned in my last video, so check that video out if you were wondering what hard drive I use whilst I'm on the go. But with a quick change, you can actually change the way that Final Cut deals with your files. All you just do is go into Preferences and then change the option from copying all of your files into the library and move that to, I believe it's called Keep in Place. That means what will happen is all of your files are sort of referenced like they are in Premiere Pro, and you can keep them on your hard drive in your formulaic folder structure, and you don't have this massive library building up hundreds of gigabytes worth of footage. Everything is dynamically linked to where it actually already lives on your hard drive. That was an absolute big win for me, being able to change that setting within Final Cut. Another real win was the keyboard shortcuts. I've completely changed the way a lot of the sort of basic keyboard shortcuts are set up. I've changed C to B or vice versa, and that is the way that the blade and the cut tool on Premiere Pro work. So I've just mirrored that over. And a real big win is that Final Cut Pro 10 uses what's called a magnetic timeline, so everything sort of pulls to the left once you're within a project. Now that can be fine, but when you're used to Premiere Pro where everything is sort of structured in a way that you can just have a clip and a timeline, and it doesn't really matter where things go on that timeline, that can be a bit of a strange change. So what I've done is I've remapped my select tool to V to again mirror Premiere Pro, but I've changed my default tool from the select tool to the position tool. That means that you can move clips on the story timeline and move them further along, and it will sort of automatically create that black space in the middle that we were used to from Premiere Pro. It means that everything isn't jumping around and you're not getting sort of things delete on you left, right, and center. I'm constantly learning and constantly improving my skills in Final Cut Pro 10. I've used Premiere Pro for about 7 years. I consider myself extremely proficient. It's what I do day in, day out, is I edit videos proficiently. But the benefits of things like performance, stability, the ability to actually watch your video back in full resolution whenever you want to preview it, just massively outweigh the advantages advantages that I did have within Premiere Pro. Sure, it is a bit of a learning curve. It has been a bit of a challenge, but hey, as creators, we often like to challenge ourselves. I enjoy challenging myself, and I've really enjoyed getting used to another video editing software. Hopefully this video has helped some of you if you are looking to maybe make the switch over from Premiere, from the Adobe suite over to Final Cut Pro 10. It's definitely something which I didn't think would have as much value as it currently has had for me. It really has made video editing, and particularly my YouTube videos where pace is extremely important, much more enjoyable than it was on the Adobe software. If you're new here and have enjoyed this video, please subscribe so you get notified about future uploads. Let me know if you are planning on switching or going to be switching, or if you have any questions about Final Cut in general, let me know down below in the comments. I'll be answering them as usual, and I will catch you next time.